Robert Bowers, the man behind the Tree of Life Massacre True Crime Explained. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. It was a crisp Saturday morning in Pittsburgh on October 27, 2018. The sun barely filtered through the amber leaves as members of the Tree of Life Synagogue gathered for Shabbat services. What was meant to be a sacred morning of peace and prayer would instead descend into one of the deadliest anti-Semitic attacks in American history. This chapter opens with the final moments of normalcy. Smiling faces, warm greetings, the sound of ancient Hebrew prayers. Just moments later, they were replaced by screams, gunfire, and blood on holy ground. 11 worshippers were murdered that morning. 6 others, including 4 police officers, were wounded. But the horror didn't begin with bullets. It began long before, with a man radicalized by hate, obsessed with conspiracy, and convinced he was waging a righteous war. This is where the story of Robert Bowers truly begins. As the first 911 calls came in around 9:54 a.m., dispatchers initially couldn't comprehend what they were hearing. Gunfire at a synagogue? Active shooter in a house of worship? Police officers were dispatched immediately, expecting a possible domestic disturbance or, at worst, a robbery. Instead, they were met with a war zone. Inside the Tree of Life Synagogue, Bowers had moved methodically from room to room, targeting worshippers who had no time to flee. Survivors later described the shooter's cold focus. No screaming, no frenzy, just deliberate slaughter. He carried an AR-15 rifle and 3 handguns. He used them all. Some congregants tried to hide in a kitchen, others under pews. Rabbi Jeffrey Myers helped save lives by ushering people to hidden corners. When SWAT teams finally engaged Bowers, a fierce gunfight erupted. He was shot multiple times but survived. Bowers, even after being wounded, reportedly told officers, "All Jews must die." The words echoed across the nation. In the days following the massacre, the question on everyone's lips was the same. Who could do something like this, and why? Robert Gregory Bowers, 46 years old, was a loner. He lived in a small apartment in the Pittsburgh suburb of Baldwin and worked a series of menial jobs. He had no criminal record, but online he was someone else entirely. Investigators quickly uncovered Bowers' presence on Gab, a social media platform known for harboring extremists. There, he had posted dozens of hate-filled messages, particularly targeting Jews, immigrants, and what he believed was a global conspiracy led by the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS. On the morning of the attack, Bowers posted, "HIAS likes to bring invaders in that kill our people. I can't sit by and watch my people get slaughtered. Screw your optics, I'm going in." He meant it. Robert Bowers didn't grow up in a militant household. He wasn't a known extremist in his early adult life. But over time, his worldview darkened. After his parents' divorce, Bowers reportedly drifted from place to place, socially isolated and increasingly bitter. He dropped out of Baldwin High School in the 1990s and worked as a truck driver, janitor, and part-time delivery worker. But the internet filled the social void. Bowers was drawn to message boards and fringe platforms that reinforced his growing paranoia. He consumed conspiracy theories, white nationalist propaganda, and anti-Semitic ideology. Over time, these ideas hardened into belief. He became obsessed with HIS and with the idea that Jews were orchestrating an invasion of America through immigration. Law enforcement later described his Gab profile as a roadmap to radicalization. Unchecked, unmoderated, and boiling with hate. The Tree of Life massacre wasn't the first act of terrorism tied to online radicalization, and it wouldn't be the last. Just months earlier, similar attacks in Charlottesville, Charleston, and even abroad in Christchurch revealed a new generation of homegrown terrorists fueled by online hate. What they lacked in formal training, they made up for in ideological rage. Robert Bowers became part of a dark lineage, ordinary men transformed into mass murderers through digital indoctrination. What made his case so chilling was how public his beliefs were. He wasn't hiding. He was posting everything. The warning signs were there. No one was watching. Pittsburgh had never experienced anything like this. A city known for its steel mills, rivers, and tight-knit communities suddenly became the epicenter of national grief. Vigils were held. Streets were filled with mourners. Political leaders, religious figures, and citizens stood shoulder to shoulder in candlelight. The names of the victims, Rose Mallinger, David Rosenthal, Cecil Rosenthal, and others, became rallying cries against hate. The Tree of Life Synagogue became both a crime scene and a symbol. President Trump visited, though met with mixed reactions. Security was increased at synagogues across the country. Debates over gun control and online extremism erupted. But beneath the politics was something more human. Sorrow, rage, and the question, how did we let this happen? As Robert Bowers lay in a hospital bed under armed guard, the world began learning who he was and what he believed. But deeper questions remained. Was he just one broken man, or a symptom of something larger? What role did social media truly play in creating a killer? And most haunting of all, could this have been prevented? When the name Robert Bowers first made national headlines, many saw only the mugshot. A pale, average-looking man with hollow eyes and a slightly twisted mouth. But beneath that ordinary appearance lay a mind steeped in rage, isolation, and delusion. Understanding what drove Bowers to target the Tree of Life Synagogue requires digging deep into the twisted psychology of extremism and the conditions that can turn an isolated man into a domestic terrorist. In this chapter, we unravel Bowers' psyche. Who was he before the massacre? What shaped his hatred? And how does someone justify mass murder in the name of ideology? Robert Bowers wasn't famous. He wasn't feared. In fact, he was virtually invisible. Neighbors described him as reclusive but polite. He lived alone in a modest apartment complex in Baldwin, Pennsylvania. No one remembers him hosting friends, attending parties, or even engaging in small talk. For years, he blended into the fabric of American anonymity. A man ignored, overlooked, and slowly eroding from the inside. Bowers' childhood was marked by instability. His father, a long-haul trucker, died by suicide when Robert was just a child. His mother struggled with health issues, both physical and emotional. These early experiences likely seeded feelings of abandonment and distrust that would later bloom into full-fledged paranoia. Teachers remembered him as quiet but troubled. He dropped out of high school and bounced between low-wage jobs. There was no formal criminal history, no history of violence. But beneath that surface, something dangerous was brewing. What happens when a person feels invisible for too long? For Robert Bowers, the internet became the answer. In isolation, he crafted an identity rooted in superiority and blame. On fringe platforms like Gab, he wasn't just a faceless man, he was a warrior. He absorbed conspiracy theories that gave his life a distorted sense of purpose. He believed Jews were orchestrating the downfall of white America. He believed HIS was part of a global scheme to replace his people with immigrants. Every hateful post was another brick in his mental fortress. He didn't seek debate, he sought validation. And on Gab, he found it. Psychologists describe this as cognitive reinforcement. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. By the time Robert Bowers was taken into custody, the nation was already reeling. The attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue wasn't just another mass shooting, it was the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in American history. And with that weight came a legal battle that would test the boundaries of justice, free speech, and moral accountability. This chapter explores the dramatic courtroom moments, legal strategies, emotional testimony, and the difficult road to justice. It's not just about what happened inside the courtroom, but what it revealed about America itself. Within days of the massacre, the Department of Justice announced federal charges against Robert Bowers. In total, he faced 63 criminal counts, including obstruction of free exercise of religious beliefs resulting in death, use of a firearm to commit murder, hate crimes resulting in death, obstruction of law enforcement officers during civil disorder. Federal prosecutors signaled early on that they would seek the death penalty. It was a rare move, but the government argued that the severity of the attack demanded it. For many survivors and victims' families, this was the first sign that the system was taking their pain seriously. Bowers was assigned a public defense team, including Judy Clark, a renowned attorney who had previously represented high-profile defendants like Jakar Sarnaev and Jared Launer. Her presence raised eyebrows. She's known for negotiating life sentences to avoid executions. The defense never denied that Bowers carried out the shooting. Instead, they argued mental illness, stating he was deeply delusional and driven by psychosis. Clark's strategy was clear: save Bowers from the death chamber. But prosecutors were ready. The government had an overwhelming trove of evidence. Surveillance footage placing Bowers at the scene. Ballistics analysis tying weapons to shell casings. Digital evidence from Gab showcasing months of hate-filled posts. Witness testimony from survivors who described the horror inside the synagogue. In one particularly powerful moment, a survivor who had been shot in the torso recalled playing dead beneath the body of a friend. His voice cracked as he described the pure hatred in the shooter's eyes. Jurors sat in silence. Some wiped tears. Others simply looked stunned. Throughout the trial, Robert Bowers never testified. He showed little emotion, often sitting motionless. His legal team said he didn't grasp the consequences of his actions. But in jailhouse conversations and psychiatric evaluations, Bowers made it clear: Jews are committing genocide against my people. His lawyers claimed this wasn't rational, this was delusion. But prosecutors argued it was ideology masquerading as madness. For many families, the courtroom became a sanctuary of sorts, a place to finally speak, to grieve, and to demand justice. One widow described the last moments of her husband's life. Another recounted seeing friends and fellow congregants gunned down as they tried to flee. The rawness of their pain filled the courtroom like smoke, thick, suffocating, unforgettable. A rabbi from the synagogue spoke of rebuilding not just the building, but the faith of a wounded community. "We don't just want punishment," he said. "We want understanding. We want to stop this from ever happening again." After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. Given the mountain of evidence and the clarity of the attack, it didn't take long. Robert Bowers was found guilty on all 63 counts. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Some cried, others embraced, but no one celebrated. The pain was too fresh, the loss too deep. Now came the sentencing, a second phase of the trial where jurors would decide if Bowers should live or die. This phase was emotional and intense. Prosecutors emphasized the premeditation, the hatred, and the devastation left behind. They argued Bowers was not insane. He was cold, calculating, and committed. The defense countered with psychiatric evaluations. They introduced doctors who diagnosed Bowers with schizoid personality disorder and delusional beliefs. They played recorded calls from his mother, where he spoke of hearing voices. But even some of the jurors later admitted they weren't convinced. Was this true mental illness, or a defense strategy? After intense deliberation, the jury returned their decision. Robert Bowers was sentenced to death. It was a landmark ruling, the first federal death sentence for anti-Semitic hate crimes in U.S. history. The judge addressed Bowers directly. "You showed no mercy, and this court will show you none in return." The verdict sparked debate across the country. Some questioned whether the death penalty was justice or vengeance. Others saw it as the only acceptable response. But beyond legal questions, the trial revealed a deeper truth. America is still struggling with how to confront ideological violence. Lawmakers began pressing tech companies to better monitor hate speech. Religious organizations demanded increased security. And across Pittsburgh, synagogues wrestled with the fear that they, too, could be next. Justice was served in the courtroom, but outside, the work was only beginning. When the courtroom doors closed behind Robert Bowers, Pittsburgh was left with something far more difficult than justice. It was left with grief. 11 lives were taken, dozens more forever altered, and a city's sense of safety shattered. The Tree of Life Synagogue, once a place of joy and tradition, had become a crime scene. But the story didn't end with a verdict. It continued in hospital rooms, in therapy sessions, in silent vigils and shaky prayers. This chapter is about the aftermath, the slow, painful, and powerful journey of healing. In the days following the massacre, the Squirrel Hill neighborhood was enveloped in a fog of disbelief. Yellow tape still marked the synagogue's perimeter. Journalists crowded sidewalks. Strangers wept in front of makeshift memorials. Flowers, Yarzite candles, handwritten notes. Funerals came in waves, one after another. 11 separate ceremonies. 11 separate losses. For Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life congregation, it was a challenge not just of faith, but of endurance. "I'm a rabbi," he said. "I'm supposed to have answers, but even I don't understand this." Mourning extended beyond faith lines. Churches, mosques, and secular communities joined in solidarity. Vigils were held across the city. Some drew crowds of 5,000 or more. The pain wasn't limited to Pittsburgh. It echoed across America. Survivors of mass shootings often suffer from long-term psychological trauma. PTSD, anxiety, and survivor's guilt are common. Mental health professionals from across the country volunteered their services. Trauma therapists were dispatched to meet with survivors, families, and first responders. Pittsburgh's Jewish Family and Community Services provided grief counseling and emergency support. But the recovery process was uneven. Some found solace in community support. Others struggled in silence. "I'm afraid to go back," one congregant admitted. "The place where I prayed is where my friends were slaughtered." Leaders of the synagogue faced a gut-wrenching question. Should they rebuild? Some argued the building should be preserved as a memorial. Others wanted to return it to its former glory, to take back the space, not surrender it. Ultimately, the congregation chose both, rebuild and remember. In 2021, a $6.6 million renovation project was announced. The new design would include a sanctuary, a memorial space, and an educational center to combat hate. Architect Daniel Libeskind, who designed the World Trade Center Memorial, was chosen to lead the project. "We're creating a place of resilience," he said, "a sacred site of memory and hope." Construction began in 2023 and is expected to be completed in 2026. The attack spurred a wave of interfaith solidarity. Muslim groups raised over $200,000 for victims' families. Christian churches opened their doors for Jewish worshippers. Black pastors and Catholic priests stood arm in arm with rabbis. One viral moment occurred when members of a local mosque delivered food and prayer cards to Tree of Life just hours after the attack. This interfaith unity didn't stop at the symbolic level. Pittsburgh's religious communities began hosting regular dialogues on anti-Semitism, racism, and religious extremism. "We don't want to go back to normal," said Pastor Darnell Clark, "because normal is what allowed this to happen." The shooting revealed significant gaps in how hate crimes are monitored and prevented. The FBI, under pressure, revised its protocols for tracking domestic terrorism. New guidelines were introduced to monitor online extremism more closely. State and federal task forces were created to investigate hate groups. Still, some critics argue that progress has been too slow. "We're always reacting," said former Homeland Security Advisor John Cohen. "We need to start predicting." Congressional hearings were held. Civil rights groups demanded stricter gun laws and expanded hate crime legislation. The tragedy fueled national debates about firearm access and social media accountability. The Tree of Life massacre became a flashpoint for how America views anti-Semitism. Jewish communities reported a dramatic increase in security spending. Armed guards became common at synagogues. Some began holding active shooter drills. But beyond fear, there was a growing call for education. Holocaust awareness programs expanded. Schools in Pittsburgh added curriculum on anti-Semitism. Survivors began speaking at universities and civic centers. "Knowledge is prevention," said Holocaust survivor Judah Samet, who had narrowly missed being at Tree of Life that morning. "The less people know, the more they hate." Each of the 11 victims left behind a legacy. They were mothers, fathers, grandparents, teachers, doctors. Their stories became central to Pittsburgh's healing. One of the most moving tributes came from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who wore helmet decals honoring the victims for the remainder of the season. Players attended funerals. The NFL observed a moment of silence. Billboards across the city read simply, "Stronger than hate." The phrase became a rallying cry, a reminder that while hate had taken 11 lives, it had not broken the spirit of a city. In the years since the massacre, Pittsburgh has become a case study in both tragedy and resilience. It has shown how hate can shatter, but also how love can rebuild. But one question still looms. What if someone like Robert Bowers is out there now? Someone quietly radicalizing, waiting, planning? The Tree of Life massacre was not an isolated event. It was a symptom of something deeper, darker, and still very much alive in American society. As Pittsburgh rebuilt, and as Robert Bowers sat in prison awaiting execution, a disturbing truth came into focus. The ideology that fueled him hadn't died. It had spread. This final chapter explores what we've learned or failed to learn about domestic extremism since the Tree of Life tragedy. How vulnerable are we now? And what, if anything, is being done to stop the next Robert Bowers? In the years since the attack, extremist rhetoric online has only intensified. Platforms like Gab, 8kun, and unmoderated corners of Reddit remain breeding grounds for hate speech and conspiracy theories. Researchers at the Anti-Defamation League and Southern Poverty Law Center have documented a rise in white nationalist forums, many of which idolize mass shooters like Bowers. These individuals are being radicalized in digital echo chambers, said investigative journalist Jane Litvinenko. And they're not just talking, they're planning. What's alarming is how young some of these new adherents are. Teenagers, college students, disillusioned veterans, ordinary people drawn in by a mixture of fear, misinformation, and algorithm-driven content. Law enforcement continues to struggle with what's been dubbed the lone wolf dilemma. Many attackers act alone without formal ties to organized groups, but they are not ideologically alone. They draw inspiration from manifestos, online propaganda, and past killers. Authorities now believe that Bowers' attack directly inspired a shooter in Poway, California, and possibly the gunman in El Paso, Texas. Each cited similar grievances: immigration, Jewish influence, and white genocide conspiracies. The FBI has adjusted its threat assessments. But critics argue it's not enough. "You can't arrest an idea," said former FBI agent Michael German, "but you can starve it of oxygen. And right now, we're feeding it." Houses of worship across America now operate with a level of caution previously unthinkable. Synagogues have hired armed guards. Churches conduct shooter drills. Mosques invest in surveillance systems. The Tree of Life massacre taught religious communities that even sacred ground is not immune to violence. But the costs, financial, emotional, spiritual, are heavy. "It's heartbreaking," said Rabbi Amy Fader. "We want to welcome the stranger, not frisk them." Still, religious leaders acknowledge the necessity. Some states have provided grant programs for security upgrades. Others have left it up to individual congregations. Federal and state governments have taken some steps. The Department of Homeland Security expanded its domestic terrorism division. The FBI increased tracking of hate groups. Congress introduced several bills aimed at curbing online radicalization. But progress has been halting. Proposals to regulate social media algorithms or restrict firearm access for hate crime offenders have stalled. Partisan gridlock often reduces meaningful legislation to political theater. "There's a lot of talk," said survivor Dan Ledger, "but we need action. We needed it yesterday." Perhaps the most dangerous trend isn't the volume of hate. It's the silence of bystanders. Family members often overlook red flags. Friends dismiss dangerous rhetoric as just venting. Coworkers ignore warning signs. In the case of Robert Bowers, acquaintances later admitted they noticed his descent into extremist rhetoric but said nothing. "If you see something, say something" isn't just a slogan, it's a lifeline. But in a polarized, suspicious society, who do we trust to hear us? Experts agree. Prevention begins with knowledge. Holocaust education, critical thinking skills, digital literacy, these are the tools that can help stop hate before it turns to violence. Programs like Not in Our Town and Facing History and Ourselves have gained traction. But implementation is uneven. Some school boards resist including material that deals with race, anti-Semitism, or white supremacy. Silence is complicity, said historian Deborah Lipstad, and ignorance is gasoline for hatred. America is at a crossroads. It can continue down the path of reactive politics and performative outrage, or it can confront the ugly truths unearthed by the Tree of Life shooting. The next attacker may already be plotting. The next community may already be marked, but the future is not yet written. If Pittsburgh proved anything, it's that even in the shadow of horror, resilience is possible. 11 lives were taken, but their stories remain. Their names are etched not just on headstones, but on the conscience of a nation. The Tree of Life Synagogue will reopen in 2026, not as it was, but as a symbol of what can rise from hate. And the world will watch, remembering the pain, but also the promise that love outlives hate, that silence can become voice, and that even the darkest chapters demand to be told. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.